Hey there folks, let's continue. From the conditionals folder, go ahead and back out and then create a new folder called loops. Then in that folder, start a new file called while.py. In this lesson, you're going to learn about looping, which is a mechanism in programming that allows you to run the same set of instructions over and over based on a set of criteria. There are multiple ways to loop, but the first way you'll learn is the while loop. The while loop has the following syntax. While some condition is true, do something, else, do something else. This should look very familiar to you because it's pretty much exactly like an if-else statement. What's different is that the if-else statement will only check the condition and then execute the instructions once, whereas a while loop will continually check the condition and execute over and over and over until the condition changes or the user manually boots out. Here is a really basic example. While true, print yeah. You can see here that if I write my changes and execute, it's just going to keep printing yeah for forever because true is always going to be true, right? So I have to manually stop this program. I'm going to do that with another keyboard shortcut, Control-C. That's another good keyboard shortcut to know. That is the keyboard interrupt, and it'll stop most running programs. So let's flip back over to a code and do something a little more useful now. Define a variable called n and then set it equal to 0. Then in the line below, change the condition to be while n is less than 100. Finally, change the print statement to print n. Now if we save this code and run it as is, we're going to run into the same problem because n is always going to be equal to 0, meaning it's always going to be less than 100, right? So we're going to change this so that n counts up by 1 every time it loops. So how do we do this? Well, we can't just set n equal to 1 because then after the first time it loops, it's just going to be n equals 1 for forever, right? So we need to do something different. Instead, we can set n equal to the current value of n plus 1. Do you see what's happening here? The very first time we run through this loop, n is equal to 0. But when we get to this line right here, what we're doing is we're basically creating another variable, or the same variable, whatever, n, but we're going to be setting it equal to n, which is currently 0 plus 1. And so after this line executes, n is now equal to 1. So this loop concludes its last statement and then circles back. We're going to check the condition again. Is 1 less than 100? Yes, that's true. So we're going to execute everything below again. We're going to print n again, but this time n is equal to 1. And then when we get to this statement right here, we're going to set n equal to what n currently is, which is now 1, plus 1. And so n is now going to be equal to 2. This loop is going to keep running over and over and over and incrementing n by 1 until finally we're going to get to n is equal to 99. This statement is going to finish n is equal to 99 plus 1, and so now n is equal to 100, and then we're going to circle back and check the condition one more time. Is 100 less than 100? No, that's false, and so we exit out of this loop. And the result of this, if I write my changes and then execute this program, you can see that this is a program that prints the numbers from 0 to 99. Now, I'm going to modify this slightly. I kind of want to print the numbers from 1 to 100 instead of 0 to 99. So I'm going to flip back to my code here. I'm going to change this condition to be n is less than or equal to 100. And then I'm going to go up here and change n to start at 1. So this is a gotcha that you should pay attention to. Very often when you're programming, you will use numbers as part of the conditions in your loops, and so you should be careful about which comparison operators you choose. Less than behaves differently than less than or equal to, and greater than behaves differently than greater than or equal to. I'm going to remove these comments real quick because they're messy. Let's go ahead and add an else statement to our loop. I'm going to add else colon, and then right below that, I am going to do print it's done. And so if I write this change and execute this code, you can see here at the very end, after printing all of the numbers, it just says it's done like a neat little bow on top. And so to wrap up this lesson on the while loop, let's go ahead and do something a little more interesting. In that last challenge, you had nested conditional statements, which is where you have one conditional statement inside of another. Let's just do the same thing here. We're going to put a conditional statement inside of our loop. Here, I'm going to add a quick statement if n%2 is double equal 0. Do you remember your operators? Modulus. If n modulus 2 is equal to 0, in other words, if this number divided by 2 has no remainder, I'm going to go ahead and print even, else print odd. And so if I write my changes and execute this code, you can see that every single time the loop runs through, we are printing out the number and then checking to see if it's divisible by 2 and printing out odd or even, respectively. And that is looping. That's a wrap on this lesson. In the next video, we're going to learn about another way to loop, which is the for loop.